Jamie Berger here. Today, I want to talk to you about what is by far the hardest topic for any family law attorney to discuss, and that's domestic violence. When we have clients call our office who are going through this terribly difficult time, it's heartbreaking. We are here to help you because we understand that this is a cycle of behavior, and the fact that you've made a call to an attorney means that you want out of that cycle. It's so important for you to know that you are not alone. Domestic violence can happen to anybody. Nobody is immune from it. It's also important for you to understand that there are valuable resources out there. There's help. The police can help you. An attorney can help you. The court system can help you. Please don't feel isolated and alone. That is often a tactic that abusers use to keep victims of domestic violence stuck in the same situation. Domestic violence is a cycle of behavior, and there are ways for you to break that cycle. In order for somebody to know whether they're in fact a victim of domestic violence, you need to know what it is. Domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior. It doesn't have to be physical. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes that abusive behavior can be verbal, it can be financial, it can be sexual. There's all different types of domestic violence. Under the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act, there are specific occurrences that a court would consider an act of domestic violence. Some of the common ones are harassment, stalking, false imprisonment, kidnapping, but there are many more. We've linked the actual Prevention of Domestic Violence Act to our website, so please look at all of the different definitions that a court would consider. I mentioned before that anybody can experience domestic violence, but in order for the court to consider you a victim of domestic violence under the statute, you have to have a particular relationship with the abuser. What does this mean? There has to be some link between you and the abuser that is more than just somebody that you would see on the street, right? So it can be a spouse, an ex-spouse, a co-parent, somebody that lived in your home previously or currently that you share a home with. It has to be somebody that you had a dating type relationship with. These are the types of examples under the statute that the court would consider. So now that you know what domestic violence is, what do you do if you're experiencing it? Well, you need to protect yourself. And once you've figured out that you can get out of this cycle of behavior, there are things that you can do. There are resources available to you to protect yourself. You can go to the county in which you live, or where the abuse happened, or where the abuser lives, and you can file for a temporary restraining order. Let me provide you a little bit of information about what the process looks like of getting a temporary restraining order. You're going to show up to the courthouse and you're going to meet with a member of the domestic violence team. You're going to give them a statement, and you want to make sure you give as many details as you possibly can. They may ask you questions about what happened, the incident itself, or whether or not there is a prior history of domestic violence. And you're going to want to give as much of a detailed account as you possibly can. But please don't worry. Sometimes, especially in overwhelming moments, we forget to mention things. There is a process for amending a restraining order, whether a temporary one or a final one, which I'll get to in a second. And so if you've forgotten to give a detail that you later determine to be important, don't worry, that process can be utilized. After you've had the opportunity to meet with the domestic violence advocate and go over some information and get your statement down, you're going to appear before a judge, whether that happens virtually or in person. You're going to appear before a judge, and they're going to take some testimony from you about what happened, what occurred, and how you're feeling in that moment. Are you fearful? Do you have concern for your safety? And you're going to want to make sure that you relay all of that information to the judge because it's important. Once you've concluded your testimony, a judge may issue that temporary restraining order. You will leave the courthouse with a piece of paper that prevents your abuser from contacting you in any way, may prevent them from contacting other people if they're protected parties. It may prevent them from having any parenting time. There are all sorts of things that can be put into the temporary restraining order for your protection. Once you have a copy of the temporary restraining order, the abuser will be served with a copy. At that point, if they contact you in any way, that's considered a violation of the restraining order. You're going to want to pay close attention to any dates that are on that temporary restraining order. One of the things that a court's going to do once they issue a temporary restraining order is set a date for a final restraining order hearing. That typically is done within 10 days of the date that the temporary restraining order is entered. If up until this point you haven't contacted a family law attorney, you want to make sure that this is the point before a final restraining order hearing that you do, because a final restraining order hearing is an opportunity for both the plaintiff and the defendant, the victim and the accused, to give testimony to the court as to whether or not a final restraining order should be entered. It's important for you to know that because a final restraining order is exactly that, it's final unless the victim dismisses voluntarily or the accused, the abuser, files an appropriate application to vacate. The final restraining order standard that a court will consider is higher than that which they considered for a temporary restraining order. Specifically, a court's going to look at three things: whether or not you have the requisite relationship to be a victim of domestic violence, whether or not there was a predicate act of domestic violence under the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act, and also whether there is an ongoing need for a restraining order in order to prevent you, the victim, from any type of additional domestic violence. Our attorneys understand that the domestic violence process is extremely stressful, especially for the victims of domestic violence. Oftentimes, you're facing your abuser. They may be asking you questions directly that a court is going to require you to answer. That's why having an attorney who can represent you and make sure that you're giving the testimony that you need to give in order to protect you on a going forward basis is so important. Judges in New Jersey don't take these matters lightly, because if a final restraining order is entered against somebody, there are consequences. Their name may be put on a central registry. There's prohibitions against buying firearms or possessing firearms. There may be loss of jobs. There's implications when it comes to child custody if there's an ongoing child custody dispute. If, in fact, there's a violation of a temporary restraining order or a final restraining order, there may be criminal action taken against that person. So judges are discerning when they're making these decisions. It goes without saying that domestic violence victims should be afforded every protection available to them under the law. But there are instances where people are falsely accused of domestic violence. I've seen it happen. There are people who are going through a messy divorce, or there's a contentious custody case. They don't see eye to eye. Tempers flare, they have a disagreement. Those types of disagreements or contretemps don't necessarily amount to domestic violence. And there has to be a distinction because of all of those consequences that I just mentioned. Whether you are a victim of domestic violence or somebody who has been falsely accused of domestic violence, it's important for you to understand your rights and how to protect yourself or how to defend yourself. That's what we do. That is what we are here for. You should pick up the phone and call us because we can help you. We can help you prepare your case. We can help you defend against any false accusations, but you need to make sure you have the right type of attorney on your side because this is serious. I know I gave you a lot of information today, and I know that this is a really heavy topic to cover. If you need more information or support, please don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call our office. We are here to help you.